Okay. So today, instead of Bhagavatam, it's a special day of the Vaishnava calendar. For those of you who have looked at the Vaishnava calendar, it's the appearance day of Srivasa Thakura. And we're going to be talking about him this morning, because he's a very important personality. So, Om Ganat Chimirandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmeditam Yena Tasmai Shigurve Namaha. So, first we'll talk a little bit about what's called the ontological position of Srivasa Thakura, and that's a big word. Basically, it means what his identity is, ontological. So we have the Panchatattva. Everybody's heard of the Panchatattva here? No. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasa Gaur Bhaktivinoda. So the last 2 days we've been mentioning about the word tattva. You know, tattva means basically that which exists, which is an eternal category. Okay. So, as far as the members of the Panchatattva are concerned, you have Vishnu Tattva members, which are 3. That is, Lord Chaitanya, who is Krishna himself, Brajendra Nandana Sachi Sutta Hoilas. That means Brajendra Nandana Krishna has appeared as Sachi Sutta. Sachi Sutta means the son of Sachi Devi. And then Lord Nityananda Balaram Hoila Nitai, Lord Nityananda is Balaram. And then Advaita Acharya, who is basically sometimes described as Sadashiva, sometimes described as Mahavishnu, etc. And he is also Vishnu Tattva. So you got 3 Vishnu Tattvas there. So Vishnu Tattva means they're all the same person, but in different moods simultaneously. As we hear in the Brahma Samhita, Advaita Chuta Nadirananta Rupamadhyam Purana Purusham Navyovanam Cha Vedeshu Durlabha Madurlabha Matma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajame. There's one God, he appears in various forms. So another description that probably gives us like a gem called the Vaidurya gem. The Vaidurya gem is a gem that if you look at it in different angles, it appears differently. It's something like a crystal. I don't know how you've seen a crystal. Like the chandeliers, they have crystals, and if you look at them from different angles with the light reflection in different ways, the crystal looks differently. So the same way the Lord appears differently, looks differently according to different circumstances, but he's Jopi Samayatnam Bhutanam Nishwaram Visham Prakatim Swamadistaya Sabhavami Abhimaya. He's always coming to the same transcendental body, which is Satchidananda Vigraha. So those are the 3 Vishnu Tattvas, and then you have Shakti Tattva, Gadadhara Pandit Goswami, who is considered to be Radha Rani, Rishabhanu Nandini. That's a beautiful name, Rishabhanu Nandini. I love that name. Who is the daughter of Rishabhanu. So anyway, and Gadadhara Pandit Goswami exhibits a slightly different mood than Radharani exhibits, because he's in a submissive mood towards Lord Chaitanya. Whereas Radharani is she's left-handed gopi. You understand? Left-handed gopi means she argues with Krishna. She raises a stick to Krishna, and Krishna has to bow down at her feet to beg forgiveness. Just like a henpecked husband. You understand? Henpecked? You know what henpecked is? Do you have that expression here? Please forgive me. Anyway, so Krishna bows down. He's controlled by Radharani. And then finally you have the Jiva Tattva member of the Panchatattva, who is Srivasa Thakura. And Srivasa Thakura not only is the Jiva Tattva representing us, but he is actually Narada Muni. So Narada Muni appears in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes in this way. So here's a little history. and some stories about Srivasa Thakur, that he was born in a place called Srihat in Bengal, and later on he moved to Navadvip when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. And he was quite older than Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Not as old as his Vaitacharya, but he was old enough to be his father. And Srivas had brothers who were incarnations of great sages too. Like he was incarnation of Narada, and his brother Sriram was Parvata Muni, and Sripati, Srinidhi. These were his brothers, and they were all incarnations of sages. And his wife was named Malini, who was, in Krishna Lila, she was Ambika, or Krishna's nurse. So all these different personalities that appeared with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, at least the eternal liberated personalities, they actually had their position in Braj Lila. And in the book by Kavi Karnapur, Gauraganadesh, that the different personalities are described, who they were in Braj Lila. So it's a very important book, and someday you can read it. So he was the friend, that is, Srivasa Thakur was the friend of Jagannath Mishra, and Malini, the wife of Srivasa Thakur, was the friend of Sachi Devi, and she cared for Sachi Devi when she was pregnant with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and she cared for her just like a nurse. So the interesting thing that happened in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes is that before he took initiation, he acted like a non-devotee, which is interesting. Not only did he act like a non-devotee, but he would attack the devotees. Not attack them, physically with fists or anything, but he would attack them with his words. And he was very well known for Nyaya philosophy. Nyaya basically means logic. He understood how to argue with anyone and defeat them. And of course, there's many stories in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's youth about how he defeated different pandits. There was this Digvijay, the conquering pandit, who went all over India, and Lord Chaitanya defeated him so soundly, even though he was worshipping the goddess of fortune, or the goddess of learning, Saraswati. And he surrendered to Lord Chaitanya. So anyway, so the devotees were very upset with Lord Chaitanya. In fact, he was called at that time Nimai Pandit, and the devotees would avoid Lord Chaitanya. Whenever they saw him walking on the street, they would go to the other side of the street because they were basically not wanting to argue with him. And one time, this is an interesting quote from the scriptures, Srivasa asked Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, "O crest jewel of arrogance," that means you're the most arrogant person I've ever met in the world. And of course, later on, we know Lord Chaitanya said, "Manina, manadena, kirtaniya sadari." He said, "O crest jewel of arrogance, do you know the purpose of life?" And Lord Chaitanya replied, or Nimai Pandit replied, "By your mercy I will know." And actually, he said to Srivasa that one day, by your mercy, I'll become such a great devotee that even Lord Brahma will worship me. So Srivasa Thakur was thinking, this is actually the most proud, puffed up person I've ever met in my life. So of course, after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took initiation, he was showing us by example the importance of approaching the spiritual master. This is it. Because Lord Chaitanya, he wanted to show us how to execute bhakti. Like Prabhupada describes, like a teacher sometimes will appear to be learning the subject matter, but he's not learning. And say, "Class, how much is 1 and 1?" And he knows, but he's asking the class as if he did not know. That's called here's another big word for you, rhetorical question. You can actually impress your friends with all the big words I'm teaching you in class. Rhetorical question means you know the answer and you're asking the person anyway as if you didn't know the answer to test them. So, after some time, Lord Chaitanya took initiation from Ishwara Puri. In Gaya, he came back and he exhibited himself not only as the best devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but also as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why we put a peacock feather on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I know sometimes there's been some arguments in ISKCON about whether Lord Chaitanya, the deity, can have a peacock feather or not. But he can, because he not only acted or sometimes manifested himself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but sometimes he even sat on the altar. The altar. Can you imagine if, like, any of us would go and sit on the altar with Radha and Krishna? Yeah, just imagine that in your scenario that one morning you wake up and Gokul Bandhar's sitting on the altar. I mean, just, oh my God. It would be shocking. Of course, he is not God, don't worry. So this is what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. He actually called for Srivasa while he was sitting on the altar. He manifested 4 arms and he said, Srivasa, I am who you have been worshiping your whole life. And Srivasa was completely overawed, amazed. And he offered these prayers that I'm going to read right now, this beautiful prayer. This is a direct quote from Srivasa Thakura. My obeisance is at the lotus feet of the support of the entire universe, Vishwambar, whose bodily color is like that of a newly arrived rain cloud, and whose garments are the color of a thunderbolt. My obeisance at the lotus feet of the son of Sachi, who is bedecked with ornaments and peacock feathers and garland of Gunjamala. My obeisance at the lotus feet of the pupil of Gangadas, that's Lord Chaitanya's guru, the beauty of whose, actually teacher, not initiating guru, the beauty of whose lotus face conquers that of 10 million moons. My obeisance at your lotus feet, you who carry a buffalo horn, stick, and flute. The 4 Vedas have proclaimed you to be the son of Nanda Maharaj. Unto you, my dear Lord, my obeisances I offer again and again. That's from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavat, sorry. Today my birth, my activities, my everything have become successful. Today my very existence has been crowned with the greatest auspiciousness. Today the race of my forefathers has finally borne fruit, and my house, which was also their house, has become blessed. Today the great fortune of my eyes is completely beyond calculation, because I have been able to see that person whose lotus feet are served by the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi. So that's the prayer by Srivasa Thakura, and there's many interesting stories that occurred in Srivasa Thakura's house. One story is that the mother of Vrindavan Das Thakur, her name was Narayani, and she was very poor. I guess her husband had passed away, and she was living in Srivasa Thakur's house, and she was only 4, actually at this time she was very small. She was 4 years old. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to her, Narayani, chant Hare Krishna. And she began to chant Hare Krishna and rolled on the ground in ecstasy, and the Lord fed her his remnants. And later on she became the mother of Vrindavan Das Thakur. Another interesting story is that Srivasa Thakur had a servant named Dukhi. Dukhi means unhappy. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu blessed her and changed her name to Sukhi by giving her pure devotional service. Srivasa Thakur showed his great devotion to Lord Chaitanya one time by refusing to interrupt Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's kirtan, which was being done in his house. Actually, this is called the Srivasa Angam, which is right there in Mayapur, about 10-minute walk from our property, from the Mayapur and Chandradoya Mandir. So once upon a time, there was a kirtan going on. Incidentally, there were only pure devotees allowed in that kirtan. They had kept a guard at the door to keep anybody who was not an absolutely pure devotee out of the kirtan. So once upon a time, they were having a kirtan, and Srivasa Thakur's son died. And the ladies started to cry, which is natural for ladies. So they were crying, and Srivasa Thakura said, "Why are you crying?" And they said, "Your son has passed away." And he said, "Stop crying. If you don't stop crying, I'll give you something really to cry about." Oh my God. So he was tough with his wife. And they stopped crying. Somehow the ladies just like kept their eyes open and didn't cry. That actually reminds me of the story from the Ramayana, where Lakshman told to his wife, Urmila, that I'm going with Ram, and while I'm going away, you're not to cry the whole time. So Srivasa told his wives the same thing. And so the ladies couldn't cry. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued his kirtan. And at the end of the kirtan, he felt something had happened. He said, "Something has happened." And Srivasa Thakura said, "No, it's something very insignificant. Don't worry about it." And Lord Chaitanya said, "No, tell me what happened." And Srivasa Thakura said, "Oh, just my son passed away." And Lord Chaitanya said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And Srivasa Thakura said, "Because I didn't want to interfere with the nectar of your kirtan." So much devotion, isn't it? And so much renunciation. So Lord Chaitanya said, "Where is he? Where's the body?" So he went to where the body was of Srivasa Thakura's son, who had passed away, and he touched him in the heart. And he said, "Why have you left Srivasa Thakura?" And all of a sudden, the son got up. And he said, "Many, many births I have taken in this material world, and now I have finally passed away during your kirtan and gone back to Godhead." And so he wanted to die. Sometimes you see that a child in a devotee's home passes away at an early stage, or even we see sometimes that a devotee lady is pregnant and she has a miscarriage. And Prabhupada explained in those cases, the child had a little more devotional service to execute and then was going back to Godhead. So in one sense, inauspicious miscarriage, but in another sense, for a devotee, everything is auspicious. Even the passing away of someone is auspicious, as long as they pass away in a Krishna conscious way, because sooner or later, we all have to pass away. Now some people say, well, that was a very inauspicious way to die. But tell me an auspicious way to die. And so said, well, someone died in an automobile accident. Inauspicious. Why is it inauspicious? You die from old age, you die automobile accident, you die from dengue. You die because someone kills you. I mean, there's so many ways of dying. And they're depending on whether you're remembering Krishna determines whether it's auspicious or inauspicious. If you die in old age and you're not remembering Krishna, it's very inauspicious because you go to see the Yamadutas. So anyway, so that's the point. So this child actually showed his pure devotional service and went back to home, back to God. It's also similar to the story in the Bhagavatam where there was a great king. His name was Nimi. And this king had some problems with his guru, Vasishtha Muni. And Vasishtha Muni cursed him to die. Nice guru. So, yeah. Well, actually, he cursed him to die. He actually counter-cursed his guru to die too. The story's in the Bhagavatam. You can read about it. Because the guru was upset that he had done a sacrifice without him. So, anyway, so he cursed his guru to die, guru cursed him to die, and then the sages wanted to bring him back. They actually kept his body in some oil. And at the end of the sacrifice, the demigods came and they said to the demigods, we want Maharaj Nimi to come back to life again. And Maharaj Nimi came back to life and said, I don't want to come back to life. get me out of this hellish material world. I was back with Krishna, now you brought me back to this stupid place. So then he died again, went back to Godhead. And the interesting thing is, he was the forefather of Maharaj Janak, who was the father of Sita Devi. Because what they did is they genetically took the chromosomes and everything, whatever, and used whatever devices and mantras they had, and churned the bodies described, and cloned him. So, the sages could even clone people years and years ago. And they had the first Janaka, Janaka the first, and then there's Janaka the second, Janaka the third, all the way to the Janaka who was the father of Sita Devi. So that story's in the Ramayana, the Valmiki Ramayana. So, getting back to Srivasa Thakur also was very renounced in spite of being married with a child. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu one time said to him, how do you maintain yourself? What job, how do you make money? And Srivasa Thakur said, I have this 1, 2, 3 technique. That if I don't eat for 3 days, I'm going to tie a stone to my body and drown myself in the Ganges. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, oh my God. He said, don't worry. From this day forward, even if the goddess of fortune has to go begging, you will have enough to eat. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally provided for Srivasa Thakur. And many, many stories. There's a story about Devananda Pandit. Devananda Pandit was a great reciter of the Bhagavatam. Now, if you go to India, you'll see many people reciting the Bhagavatam. They're called Bhagavad Saptaha, 7-day Bhagavatam reciters. And quite famous. People make a lot of money doing that. So Devananda Pandit was reciting the Bhagavatam. And while he was reciting the Bhagavatam one day, Srivasa Thakur happened to come into the Bhagavatam class. And when Srivasa Thakur heard the Srimad Bhagavatam being recited, what did he do? He fell into ecstasy and started rolling on the ground. And Devananda Pandit's disciples, and followers, and students, took Srivasa Thakur and physically threw him out of the Bhagavatam class. And Devananda Pandit didn't say anything. So later on, because of that offense, he became unable to understand the Bhagavatam. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was walking by the Bhagavatam class, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu yelled out, Devananda Pandit will never understand the Bhagavatam. So he lost his ability. But that's not the end of the story. Once upon a time, after that, Devananda Pandit was protecting this other devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. His name was Prakeshvara Pandit. Prakeshvara Pandit was a great dancer. He could dance for 72 hours without stopping during kirtan, not Bollywood dancing. So he would dance for 72 hours, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so pleased, he said, if I had two devotees like Prakeshvara Pandit, I would fly in the air because he's like a wing. So if I had 2 wings, I would be able to fly in the air. So Prakeshvara Pandit was dancing and all the crowd was surrounding him, and to protect him, Devananda Pandit was protecting him from the crowd. And so Lord Chaitanya was very pleased with that, and he advised Devananda Pandit to apologize to Srivasa Thakur. And he apologized to Srivasa Thakur, and then he was able to understand the Bhagavatam again. So this is an interesting lesson for us, that if you offend a Vaishnava, you lose your ability to understand the Bhagavatam, you lose your taste for the holy name. So instead of offending Vaishnavas, we should be serving Vaishnavas. Very, very important. Actually, it's described that when a Vaishnava comes into your presence, if you're not happy, that's an offense. If he walks into your house or comes in front of you, any Vaishnava, and you go, ooh, it's him again? Yuck. That's an offense. Right there. So you have to be really careful. There's that whole story. It was either Sanatana or Rupa Goswami. that they were in meditation. And during their meditation, there's one of the two of them, I forget which one, they were laughing at some pastime that they were perceiving in their heart. And at the same time, a sage came by, a devotee came by, who was a little bit crippled. And so he thought that Sanatana Rupa Goswami was laughing at him. And because he even thought that, the meditation broke, and Sanatana Rupa Goswami just like was wondering, what happened to my meditation? I must have offended the devotee. And later on, he was able to explain to this Vaishnava, and everything was all right. So it's so serious, not having the right attitude towards a Vaishnava. So many stories like that. So, Srivasa Thakur also played Narada Muni when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would have his plays. And that was actually his real position. Another time, a devotee or a person became very envious of Srivasa Thakur because he was not allowed to enter into the kirtan of Srivasa Thakur, into the Srivasa Angamadai. And so he thought, let me make it seem that Srivasa Thakur is worshipping Durga Devi. Because the Vaishnavas respect the demigods, but they don't really make special worship of the demigods. I mean, they may worship them as devotees, but not as God. I mean, for example, let's say if one day you came to my room and found me doing Durga worship. And I had Durga on a high platform and Krishna on a low platform. You'd say, maybe I joined the wrong movement. Or maybe there's a different understanding of the philosophy. But so anyway, so this personality, Gopal Chapala, he put the ingredients for worshiping Durga outside of Srivasa Thakur's house. So this is called framing someone. Framing means you make it seem like they're doing a crime when they're not actually doing a crime. I've seen in India sometimes if they want to arrest someone, they'll put marijuana in their house. I don't know if they do that here. And then they arrest them, and the police take them away, even though they haven't committed any crime. That's planting evidence. It's called planting evidence or framing someone. So this personality, he did it. And as a result, after 3 days, he got leprosy. And leprosy, I think you all know what leprosy is. Used to have leper colonies here in Fiji. But now, of course, there's a cure for leprosy. And so the worms started to bite him, and these fingers started to melt away. So this personality, Gopal Chapala, understanding that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is also the most merciful incarnation of the Lord, approached Lord Chaitanya, and he asked Lord Chaitanya to forgive him, to free him from these worms. And Lord Chaitanya, instead of saying, yes, I bless you, he said, I curse you. I curse you to be bitten by these worms for many millions of births. So that's another story about offending Vaishnavas. One has to be very, very careful about these things. So later on, this personality, Gopal Chapala, was able to approach Srivasa Thakur, beg for forgiveness, and he became cured from his leprosy. Another story is that once upon a time there was a tailor who was a meat eater who was serving Srivasa Thakur. And even though he was a meat eater, Lord Chaitanya blessed him with pure devotional service. Wow. And that also shows the potency of serving a Vaishnava. That doesn't mean you can eat meat, it's just serving Vaishnavas. So Guru Maharaj said, wow, don't have to follow the 4 regular principles, but I'll just go and serve him every day. Oh my God. That's not service. So anyway, so he got pure devotional service just by serving Srivasa, a pure devotee. Mahat Seva Mahor Vimuktes. By serving a great Mahatma, you get liberated. Tamo Dvaram Yoshita Shangi Sangam. That if you actually associate or you serve those who are not Krishna conscious, then Tamo dwaram, the door to ignorance becomes open, or the door to suffering becomes open. Lord Chaitanya wanted to test one time Srivasa Thakura's love for Lord Nityananda, because Lord Nityananda was known as the Avaduta. He didn't always act according to regular principles. I mean, for example, he was known as Nityananda Gosai, and he was wearing jewelry all over his body, and he did a lot of interesting things. Anyway, so Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, actually one of the interesting things he did, this is in regard to Srivasa Thakura, is that he had a very interesting relationship with Srivasa Thakura's wife, Malini. He considered her to be like his mother. And he would actually, Lord Nityananda would sit on, these are grown people, remember, these are not kids. Lord Nityananda would sit on her lap and drink her breast milk. He's a grown man. And so this is very unusual. So Lord Chaitanya said to Srivasa Thakura one day, why are you actually accepting this Avaduta? Nobody knows where he's from. Nobody knows what his position is. Why are you dealing with him? Just kick him out of your house. And Srivasa Thakura said at that particular time that even if Nitai, Lord Nityananda, goes to a liquor store, or even if he marries a Muslim girl, I will not be dissuaded from my conviction that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced Srivasa Thakura because he was testing his dedication and devotion to Srivasa Thakura. Many things happened in the kirtan of Srivasa Thakura during the kirtan. As we mentioned before, that Srivasa wouldn't let people who were not pure devotees into his kirtan. So once upon a time, Srivasa Thakura's mother-in-law came into the kirtan, and she wasn't a pure devotee, and she was hiding behind the curtains. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was having his kirtan, and he kept crying out, I'm not experiencing any ecstasy. There must be some rascal here. He kept chanting and chanting, there's no ecstasy, there's no ecstasy. Some non-devotee is here. And so then they searched around, and they found her behind the curtain, the drapes. And Lord Chaitanya said, throw her out! And so they threw her out. And then Lord Chaitanya had ecstasy. Again, another time, there was a Brahmin who Srivasa Thakura thought was a great devotee. And this Brahmin who was just living by drinking milk. So Srivasa Thakura invited him to the kirtan. The same thing happened. The Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, someone is here who is not Krishna conscious. And so, kick him out. And Srivasa Thakura said, he's a Brahmin, he just lives by drinking milk. And Lord Chaitanya said, that's not a qualification for pure devotional service. So later on, this Brahmin became forgiven by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he was allowed again to enter into Srivasa Sangha and participate in the kirtan. So, these are some of the stories I have about Srivasa Thakura, and today, of course, is Srivasa Thakura's glorious appearance. Does anyone have any questions about Srivasa Thakura, his position, his pastimes, or his relationship with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Questions? No? Everyone's so quiet here. Rupanuga, questions?
You know, Srivasa Thakura is not alone.
Yes.
Can you explain to us? He's I'm just inquisitive about his cities in the Vaikuntha planet. And he says in Lakshmi Narayana is not the.
Yes.
What is he saying in Vaikuntha?
His service is chanting the glories of the Lord. Like if you read the Bhagavatam about Narada Muni, that's a very, very, very interesting story in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, first canto. where Srila Vyasadeva, who is the disciple of Narada Muni, he's lamenting. Srila Vyasadeva had compiled so many Vedic literatures. You know, he had divided the Vedas into 4, and then he had compiled after that, of course, the Upanishads, the Itihasas, the histories, such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. Of course, Ramayana is written by Valmiki, but Vyasadeva actually helped compile it. And so he was lamenting he wasn't feeling satisfied. And he was wondering, you know, why am I not feeling satisfied? And then while he was wondering about why he wasn't feeling satisfied, Narada Muni appears on the scene. And Narada Muni starts to chastise him. He says, are you happy, you know, encouraging people to identify the gross body and the subtle body with the self? You know, so there's a relationship between guru and disciple. And then, after some time, Srila Vyasadeva was interested in Narada Muni's history, you know, how he became Narada Muni. And Narada Muni tells his whole life history, that he was the son of a maidservant, and serving the great sages during the 4 months of the rainy season, Chaturmasha period. And during that time, he heard about Krishna from the sages and developed Vasudeva Katha Ruchi. He developed attachment to hearing about Krishna and detachment from the material world. And let's say he got initiation from the sages and actually ate their remnants. He served the sages. I mean, so this is also another example showing how by serving a Vaishnava you can get, or Vaishnavas, you can get pure devotional service. So he served the sages for the 4 months of the rainy season. Then the sages went away. They had instructed him in devotional service. He was only 5 years old. And then his mother got bitten by a snake and she died. And so Narada Muni, at that point, because he wasn't called Narada Muni, Narada means basically the person who goes. Narada. You understand? Narada. Da means to go, Nara means a person or a human being. So a person who traveled, it's called the traveling man. That's the direct translation of Narada. Anyway. So then, when his mother dies, instead of lamenting, he didn't even do the funeral. Bhagavatam states that. He didn't even do the funeral. He just went and went on pilgrimage. And while he was on pilgrimage meditating, he actually saw the Supreme Personality of God at one time. And Krishna said, you only see me this one time, that's it. Because he heard Krishna's voice after he saw Krishna. Krishna said, because you're not completely pure yet. And then after that lifetime, he took a spiritual body like the thunder and the lightning and became the great Narada Muni. And that Narada Muni has the ability to travel to the material world, the spiritual world. He's not impeded by anything. And even his instrument, the Veena, which accompanies him, was given to him by Lord Vishnu. It's interesting, isn't it? You ask, where did Narada Muni get his Veena? Well, it was given to him by Krishna. Here's your Veena, here's your instrument, go for it. So, that's such an amazing story, if you think about it. It's in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, if any of you are interested in reading about it. And then he began to travel everywhere and preach to everyone and everyone and everywhere. For example, there's that story of Mugrari, the hunter. Even a low-class man he preached to. And Mugrari, the hunter, was half-killing animals, and Narada Muni said, why are you half-killing? He said, well, this is because I learned this from my Pita. Learned it from my father. And Narada Muni said, why don't you fully kill them? And he said, no, that's not how I was trained. And then Narada Muni gives him this experience where he was able to see his future if he continued killing the animals, how the animals would kill him in the next life. And then this Mugrari and his wife become completely renounced, pure devotees. Amazing. So there's all sorts of stories about Narada Muni. Narada Muni also sometimes enters into Krishna's pastimes and talks to Kamsa. For example, Kamsa was feeling a lot of compassion towards Devaki. He was thinking, the 8th kid is supposed to kill me, right? Not the first or the second or third. So he's the first time Devaki brought back a kid, or Vasudeva brought back the child, then Kamsa thought, this is not right. The 8th one I'll kill, but let her have the other ones. And Narada Muni went to him and said, no, you're making a big mistake here, Kamsa, because you don't know how these rascals are counting. They may be counting, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so he said, thank you, Narada Muni. You saved my life. And so then he began to kill all the kids. So one may say, why is that? Why is he encouraging Kamsa to kill the kids? Well, these children actually were cursed before there's a whole story, to be killed by Kamsa, and Kamsa was previously Kalanemi. There's a whole pastime there. And they were cursed by Hiranyakashipu. They had offended Lord Brahma previously, these Shadgarbhas. So anyway, I'm not going to get into that story. Whoops. What's that? That's a big one. So chant Hare Krishna to it. So anyway, so Narada Muni does all these interesting things. Also, he took the wife of Hiranyakashipu and preached to her while she was pregnant, and little Prahlad heard about Krishna consciousness in the womb. So his business is preaching. Preaching and taking part in Krishna's pastimes in different ways. That's how he serves the Lord. And that's actually, I hate to tell you, that's the best service. To assist or to preach. And that's why Krishna says in the Gita what? Does anyone know what Krishna says in the Gita? What? Yeah. Priya Kirtana. Yeah. Yeah. So he says that there is no one more dear to me than he who explains this Bhagavad Gita to the devotees. Just giving the direct translation, which means everybody's a devotee. So Narada Muni, he has the best service. Of course, everybody's service in the Krishna conscious movement, not to make anyone think they're doing something less. We're all assisting. Just like, I may not always be going on Harinam, but I'm sending the devotees out on Harinam. I'm encouraging the devotees. Or someone is dressing the deities. That's preaching too, because people are coming and seeing Krishna. Just like we like to have Rath Yatra, that's preaching. So we want people to see the deities. We want people to take prasadam. That's the whole purpose of our Krishna conscious movement. So Narada Muni, so all of you are actually preaching. Either assisting the preaching or preaching directly, it's the same thing. You get the same benefit. You have your doing deity worship, that's preaching too. Because people are coming. You're not simply sitting at home worshiping your own deities, you're worshiping the deities that people can see. So that's preaching. So you all are very dear to Krishna. So that's Narada Muni's position. So any other questions? He's a preacher. That's how he serves Narayan. He also knows about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. But he's primarily focused on worshiping Narayan. But Narada, here's another interesting story from Govardhan. This is one of the stories I tell in Govardhan. Once upon a time, Narada Muni wanted to see the Rasa dance. And he went to Braj to see the Rasa dance. And he was stopped by Gopishra Mahadev. Gopishra Mahadev is Lord Shiva in a female form. Interesting. Why does he take this female form? To guard the Rasa dance. Because there's no men allowed in the Rasa dance, except for Krishna. That's it. You can't go and see the Rasa dance. Forget it. Unless you have a transcendental female body. So you ladies are actually more fortunate than we are. I can't see the Rasa dance. Anyway, so... No, he has to be a spiritual body. Not your body of blood, mucus, pus, and other nice things. So there has to be a spiritual body. So Narada Muni, he has a spiritual body. So he went to see the rasa dance, and Lord Shiva, in the form of Gopishwara Mahadev, said, you can't come, you have to be a woman. And Narada Muni thought, what am I going to do about this? I want to see the rasa dance. So he took a bath in this place called the Kushama Sarovara in Braj, in Vrindavan, and it's right on the side of Govardhan. And he came out and he became Naradi. Actually, I have one disciple here in Fiji, her name is Naradi, and she was really upset when I gave her that name. She thought I was making fun of her. But that's, Narada Muni is a female. So Narada Muni, he went into the rasa dance to watch it, not to dance with Krishna, because he doesn't have that relationship. And Krishna stopped at rasa dance. And Krishna said to him, what are you doing here? And Narada Muni, because he recognized him, and Narada Muni said, I'm here to see the rasa dance. And Krishna said, you should stay here in Vrindavan and compose books like the Narada Pancharatra and Narada Bhakti Sutras, which we follow. The Goswamis actually read them and compiled the information in the Narada Bhakti Sutras and Narada Pancharatra into books like the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. So he stayed in Vrindavan, or around Govardhan, in a place called Narada Kund, and even though he was cursed by Daksha not to remain in one place, because it's Vrindavan or Braj, curses don't work there. So whenever I get cursed by someone, I just go to Govardhan. I don't go to one of your witch doctors here in Fiji, right? You know, witch doctors here? Devotees here that go to these witch doctors. Crazy. Just chant Hare Krishna. So anyway, so he's there, and that's the same place that he brought Kayadu, who was Hiranyakashipu's wife, Prahlad Maharaj's mother, and preached to her about Krishna consciousness. A place called Narada Kund, right off of the Parikrama path. Anyone's been there with me? You haven't been there? Rupanuga? You went there with me, right? I took Gokul there. Anyone else been there? Yes. Oh yeah, we took you also. Radhika Prem went with us. So you're all invited to come to Govardhan, to go around Govardhan with me. That's a personal invitation to everyone. We have, devotees have 3 or 4 houses there where you can stay. Everyone's invited, but I'm not paying the ticket. Okay. Okay, on that happy note, we should end. It's time to greet the deities. All glorious to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Srivasa Thakur ki jai.